All right, how's it going, you guys? This is another of one of those videos that I like to call a fireside pitch, and where I share some creative ideas I've been having in my head for a long time, and just I just kind of wanted to talk about it, see what people think. Um, this one in particular is something that I've thought of for a long time, really. I mean, I think I've had some of these ideas in my head really ever since I was a kid, or at least I've wanted to see something like this develop. As some of you might know, I'm a musician. I've played in rock bands for years, and most of you, who know me pretty well, aren't surprised by this. But one of my all-time favorite bands is Kiss. I'm trying to think, like, besides maybe the Beatles and Queen. I'm trying to think of like a list of certain bands that have been you know, seriously influential to me in terms of wanting to become a musician, in terms of having the influence. Kiss is way up there. Like, if not number one, then they're definitely like top three or top five. Like they're very high up there. Um, even before even before I ever heard a note of their music, I knew that there was something special about them. Like, obviously the costumes, the makeup, the giant stage show, the theatrics, that captured my imagination like nothing else. I mean, they looked like superheroes come to life. And thankfully, once I heard their music, I was hooked. Like, I loved their music. It wasn't just because of the way they looked, but like the combination of that and the music that I really liked, I was hooked. I knew there was something special about these guys, and they didn't look or sound like any other band that I had ever seen or heard before, and I loved every bit of it. You know, that band was around for 50 years. During their 50-year run, Kiss sold over 75 million albums worldwide. They had 30 gold albums, which was the most gold albums of any American band. 14 of those albums were platinum, three of which are multi platinum. They were inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. And, look, whether you love Kiss or whether you hate them, you can't deny that they are one of the most successful, influential rock bands of all time. Again, whether you're a fan, non-fan, doesn't matter. The numbers, they speak for themselves, and they certainly have influenced a ton of people to become musicians. And more than being a great rock band, Kiss's image has lent itself towards merchandising and branding like very few other bands have been able to. Their onstage personas and their music, it's built up like a type of mythology over the years. Um, so much so that it extends beyond their albums. Like there have been Kiss comic books since the 1970s. They even had their own made-for-TV movie, which is the infamous Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, which came out in 1978. Um, they've also even like tried their hand at concept albums. They released a sort of a progressive concept album called Music from the Elder in 1981, which that was originally meant to be a soundtrack for a movie, but that movie never ended up being made. So that album is definitely polarizing among Kiss fans. I know the band itself isn't particularly proud of it. They've really distanced themselves from that album, and they really don't think much of it. But I personally enjoyed it. But whatever. During the mid to late '90s, when the original members of the band reunited and they put the makeup back on, Kiss Comics saw a resurgence, and they started appearing in video games and television, especially like Family Guy and Mad TV in particular, and even in films. Especially the movie Detroit Rock City in 1999. That movie was, the Kiss was very much at the center of that movie, even though it wasn't about the band itself. It was about the fans. But during this time, I had always thought that like a Kiss animated series or a movie would be really cool to see, but it never happened. Um, for whatever reason. They had appeared on Family Guy every once in a while, but I felt like there was more that they could have done besides just comedy. Now, in 2015, the band appeared in Scooby-Doo and Kiss, Rock and Roll Mystery. That was a direct-to-video animated movie where the band was depicted as these superpowered beings from another world. And they really leaned into some of the comic book like aspects of their personas, of their characters. And some of the scenes and some of the characters in the movie drew influence from Jack Kirby, who was a legendary comic book artist. Now, of course, this is a Scooby Doo movie we're talking about, so a lot of it was, it was played for comedy, but it did catch my attention. I've heard for years that Gene Simmons has wanted to produce like a proper Kiss animated series or film for years, but it just never got off the ground. In April of 2024, it was announced that Pop House Entertainment, which is a Swedish entertainment company, they had purchased the rights to Kiss's catalog of music and their intellectual property, with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. Supposedly, they would be remaining on board, in key roles for future projects going forward. So I figured, now that the entire Kiss brand is under new ownership and management, it feels like the right time to start talking. At least I feel like it's the right time to start talking about what an animated Kiss series would be. What would that be like? I think in the past it's been difficult to get something like that off the ground because Kiss is or at least they were, Kiss was a real band with real people who have real life, publicized internal dysfunction. They've had that for a long time, especially as it results to the four original members: Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss. Now, a major source of controversy is something that has heavily divided and polarized the fan base, for years, has been the use of the original makeup and the character designs. Little backstory on this. This all started ever since 2001, when Peter Criss left the band before they had a tour of Japan and Australia. And Peter Criss was replaced by longtime Kiss drummer Eric Singer, who he played with Kiss during, in the early 90s. So he came back. This time Eric Singer dyed his hair black, and he wore the Catman makeup and the costume for the rest of that tour. Now, even though Peter briefly came back to the band a year later when they went on tour with Aerosmith, Ace Frehley then left the band in 2002. And he was replaced on lead guitar by Tommy Thayer. And Tommy Thayer had worked in the band for many years in several different roles. He co-wrote a couple of their songs as far back as the late '80s. He was a producer. He acted as the road manager. I think he put together the Kiss conventions during the mid '90s, which ended up leading to the reunion of the original members. Much like what Eric Singer did before him, Tommy had inherited the spaceman makeup and the persona from Ace. So from about 2004 until the band finally called it a day, you had both Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer. They had become full-time members of the band, and they wore the spaceman and the Catman makeup, respectively. This is something that, to this day, has been a very polarizing and controversial thing among Kiss fans. A lot of people feel that those characters belong to Ace and Peter, and that Tommy and Eric should have used their own makeup designs or created their own characters. It should be noted that Ace and Peter sold off the rights to those characters and designs to Gene and Paul back in the early '80s after they left the band the first time. And to be honest, I do understand both sides of that argument. It would have been cool to see Tommy and Eric have their own unique designs. I would have liked to see that, to see, some new characters. Who knows? Maybe that could have breathed some new creativity and new life into the band. Sort of how, former members like Eric Carr and Vinnie Vincent attempted to do in the early '80s. But, I also understand Gene and Paul's points of view, because by the 2000s, Kiss's legacy was pretty well cemented in place at that point. The original four makeup designs were already, this well-established, iconic brand, and it probably didn't make as much sense for them, either creatively or financially, to reinvent themselves again by that point. With Eric and Tommy in the band, Kiss released their final two albums of new material, which was Sonic Boom in 2009 and Monster in 2012. And both of those albums seemed to feature songwriting and production that harkened back to their heyday in the 70s. So Kiss essentially was a nostalgia act for the rest of their career, which, to be fair, is very common for bands once they get to a certain age or status. These things happen. I don't fault them for it. It is what it is. But getting back to my original point regarding an animated series, if I were to write a treatment for a Kiss animated series, I would not only want to use those original four characters' designs, but I would personally want to base those characters off of the original four members of the band: Gene, Paul, Ace, and Peter. Now, not in like a strict autobiographical sense, but sort of loosely inspired by those original four guys. All four of them had very distinct personalities and a chemistry together that really put Kiss on the map, that they made Kiss what it was. Even their speaking voices are all very distinct and easily imitatable. Now I don't know what the legalities are of that, of basing fictional characters on real people, or even using even using their first names, like Paul, Gene, Ace, and Peter. I don't know if that would be too on the nose to use those names for it. But as far as what the pitch would be, I would probably make it something like this, where in this particular world, Kiss are not the legendary rock band that we know, but they start out as four young friends from New York who are trying to start a band and just trying to get started in their music careers. They would be young guys, maybe late teens, maybe early 20s. And it would probably, like, after making their debut at the sparsely attended Asylum rock bar, maybe the band members, one night they make their way to Jones Beach in Long Island, and while they're walking along the shore, the four of them spot this mysterious meteor-like object, fall down from the sky and crash into the rocks in the dunes. And you'd have Paul, Gene, Ace, and Peter discover these four mystical talismans, lost artifacts from the planet Jendel, which collectively form the Black Diamond. And that would turn the four of them into these superpowered beings, the characters we all know. The avatars of the Elder, the four who are one. They're an ancient group of warriors from the planet Jendel. So breaking down the four main characters, maybe you'd have the Star Child. Maybe his name would be Paul Evans. Sort of a shout out to Evan Stanley. Sort of a reference there. That's Paul's son in real life. But yeah, maybe the Star Child. He'd basically be the lead singer and the rhythm guitarist of the band. This version of Paul, like, normally he's like naturally sort of a shy, reserved kid. But he gains confidence after receiving the Star Child powers. And as the Star Child, Paul gains these telepathic and telekinetic powers and is essentially the band's leader. You could have another character like Shandy Strutter, who's the band's manager, and maybe Paul has a little bit of a crush on her, but maybe there's like some sort of relationship they're trying to work out. I'm just saying there are a lot of ways you can go with that. Then you'd have the Demon, Gene Klein, the bassist and the co-lead singer of the band. Now, Gene is Paul's best friend from childhood, and despite some of his, normally he's a little more bookish in his demeanor and appearance, but he's anything but shy. Now, as the Demon, he's driven by rage and emotion, but he's still basically the brains of the group. Like he's a very smart kid. And then you have the Celestial, or the Spaceman, Daniel Ace Ballard. Now, the lead guitar player of the band, Ace, is sort of the laid-back, goofy, comic relief of the band. As the Celestial, or as he calls himself, Space Ace, he controls electricity and magnetism, and also finds himself unwittingly gifted with this wealth of knowledge, regarding astronomy, quantum physics, and other bits of expertise. And this drives Gene crazy, of course, because he's normally the smart one, but occasionally Ace will just pull something out of his butt, and you know, and it ends up being correct. And he's like, "How did you know that?" And Ace would be like, I don't know." And then you'd have the Beast, Peter Caravello, the drummer of the band. He's a bit of a hothead, but very loyal and protective of his friends. And Peter's sort of a stereotypical street tough guy, and but he has a big heart underneath. Now, as the Beast, he has these cat-like reflexes, speed, agility, and added strength. He's the muscle of the group, but he also has a very sensitive side when it comes to protecting the innocent, especially his little brother, Eric. Now, like I said, the band is sort of a teenage young adult garage band from suburban Long Island who they stumble across these powers and they become superheroes with it. And just, when you look at Kiss's catalog of music, and all the other media they've appeared in, there's so many different different ways you could get characters out of that. Like you could have someone with the Fox makeup as well. Like maybe Eric is like Peter's little brother who wants to tag along, and he ends up getting powers as well. You'd have the Egyptian warrior, the Ankh makeup that Vinnie Vincent had. Maybe you could give that, and this isn't a disrespect towards Vinnie Vincent, but like maybe you could use that and put that as put that makeup on like a villain, like an antagonist character, or like some sort of anti-hero, and like that could be an interesting angle if you wanted to do that. A lot of Kiss's music, they'll have women's names in it. So you have like Beth, Christine, Delilah, Domino, Shandy, Strutter, and things like that. Like there's so many different things you could use those for. Like they have other songs with names like Mr. Speed, Mr. Blackwell, the Destroyer. Even characters like Abner Devereaux from Kiss Meets the Phantom, maybe Parasite, God of Thunder. Like I said, there's so many different ways you could go with it. But I was always thinking if there was going to be a Kiss animated series, maybe that could be a way to go about it. Now maybe it's a little bit too on the nose. Maybe using some of the the names like Paul, Gene, Ace, and Peter. Maybe that's a little bit too much because again, we are dealing with characters based on real people after all. But they'd basically be the characters in name only, and so I don't know. But those are some ideas I had. What would you like to see if there was like a Kiss animated series or a movie? If that's something you're into, like what ideas would you like to see from that? Let me know in the comments. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Check out some of the links in the description, and let me know if you have any other ideas. Catch you later.